So go to chapter 2, classification of businesses. So when we talk about classification of businesses, basically we're talking about the kind of businesses that are available. And we can only know this through economic activity. So what is economic activity itself? Economic activity involves, it takes place when resources such as capital goods, labor are combined to produce goods and services. That is what economic activity is. So that means we are going to combine different resources that we have, including human capital, to produce goods and services. This is what economic activity is. But we have different stages in economic activity. That means each business will combine resources based on the stage it is in. Do you get what I'm saying here? We're going to have different stages we're going to have different stages of economic activity. So that means each stage would have its own way of using its own resources. So what are the stages we have? We have the primary stage, which is the same as the primary sector. We have the secondary stage, which is the same as the secondary sector, and the tertiary stage, which is the same as the tertiary sector. So what is the primary stage about? The primary stage is about combination of resources, extraction of raw materials. So that's the primary stage. It's about extraction of raw materials from earth. So these raw materials are extracted. When raw materials are extracted, businesses that take care of such situation or such resources are considered as those businesses in the primary sector. So what do they do? What are those activities they do in the primary sector? We have fishing, mining, agriculture. Whatever has to do with extraction of natural resources, it's in the primary sector. I think that is clear. Then we have the secondary sector. For the secondary sector, the primary stage talks about extraction, but we cannot consume extracted raw materials. They need to be finished. They need to be used. They need to be processed. So the stage, the business or businesses that are involved in the processing of these raw materials into finished goods are in the secondary stage. Do you get the secondary stage here? Yes. So for the secondary stage, we're talking about the conversion of raw materials into finished goods. And why do we call it finished goods? We call it finished goods because it is ready to be consumed. Do you get it? Yes. So that's about the secondary sector. So what are those businesses involved in the secondary sector stage? We're talking about building, construction, assembly of computers, manufacturing. They are all in the secondary sector. Mm-hmm. So whatever involves using raw materials into finished goods, they are in the secondary sector. I think that is clear. Yes. Then the third stage is the tertiary sector or the tertiary stage. What does it involve? It involves services. So we say it involves services to not just consumers, to also other businesses. So in the service sector, this is where you see business to businesses, business to consumers. So they don't only service consumers, they also service other businesses. That's where we have banking, insurance, tourism, education. They are all in retailing. They are all in the tertiary sector because they service people or businesses. Is it clear?
Yes.
So we have now we go to relative importance of economic sector. It said, which sector of industry is most, these are stories anyway, I summarize it. So the economic sector of a country is compared through the following ways. One, so if you have to, because each country has its own economic sector, which it concentrates mostly on. Some countries, most especially countries in Africa, their strength is in the primary sector. But when you become developing or emerging, then you can have your strength in the secondary sector. But developed economies, they have their strength in the tertiary sector. So that means they employ more people in the tertiary sector than any other economic sector. So how do we compare the importance of the importance of economic sector? Here I wrote, I said the first way is the percentage of country's total population employed in each sector. So you would know if the primary sector or the secondary sector or the tertiary sector of your economy is more important. How do you know? You can know through the percentage of people you employ, the percentage of your population that are working in the primary sector, the percentage of your population that are working in the secondary sector, or the percentage of your population of your country's population that is working in the tertiary sector. So if the highest percentage of your population works in the primary sector, that means the primary sector of your economy is relatively important than any other sector. If you have the highest proportion or the highest percentage of the population working in the secondary or the tertiary sector, that is the most important sector in your economy. That is what relative importance of economic sector means. Do you get the first point? Mm-hmm. So we can do that using the population working in the sector to say, oh, we have strength in the primary sector, or we have strength in the secondary, or we have strength in the tertiary sector. That's the first way. The second one is the value of your country's output from each of the sector. You get what I'm saying here? So what's output? What's the value of output? What's the value of your GDP in the primary sector? What's the value of your country's GDP in the secondary sector? What's the value of your country's GDP in the tertiary sector? So if the value of your country's GDP as the highest through the primary sector, that means your primary sector or the country's primary sector is more important than other sectors. Do you get it?
Yes.
So those are the two ways we can know or compare the relative importance of each economic sector, either through the percentage of population working in all the sectors or through the value of output produced in that sector. Because your GDP will combine the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary. That's what your GDP will combine. Yeah. So what is the percentage of your GDP in the primary sector? What is the value of the percentage of your GDP in the secondary? What's the value of your GDP in the tertiary? So the one with the highest percentage makes it more important than the others. Yes. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. So go down. So changes in sector importance. So here there are different reasons for changes in the relative importance of the three sectors over time. They are as follows. What we're talking about is, when we talk about changes in sector importance, basically we're talking about what makes the primary sector less important than the secondary sector. What makes the secondary sector less important than the tertiary sector? What makes you to switch? What makes your country to switch from the primary sector to the secondary sector? What makes your country to switch from the secondary sector to the tertiary sector? That is, the one that is more important is where you switch to. Do you get the point there? So what are the reasons why we have changes in the economic sector? That's how the question will come. So the first one I wrote is about, one, some sources of the primary sector lack resources as they are depleted. So one of the reasons why we could switch from the primary sector to the secondary, or from the secondary to the tertiary sector, is that resources in the primary sector might have been used up. So there are no more resources in the primary sector. So why are we still there? The resources are depleted. They are used. So no more resources to engage or to combine to produce in the primary sector. So the primary sector is done. So we have to switch or move on to the secondary sector. Yes. So the first reason why there are changes in economic sector is that resources in one of the sector might have been depleted, used. So when you don't have resources to use, what would you produce? Nothing. Do you get the first point there? The second point. Most developed economies are losing their competitiveness in the secondary sector to newly industrialized countries such as China, Brazil, and India. So